100.5 FM in Vancouver. So we are talking about the I Ching, the Book of Changes. You've probably heard about it, a manual that's designed to help you with the challenges of everyday life. Our guests are authors of a book, the I Ching Oracle, a guide through the human maze. Timothy and Johanna Dowdle, they currently live in the Netherlands. They've been studying and practicing the art of divination, consulting the I Ching, and using it as a tool for decision-making since the 80s. Their book includes personal experiences, supports beginners in learning how to receive clear answers to their questions, and interpret the I Ching's wisdom. It also offers more experienced practitioners a fresh approach in interpreting their own messages. So welcome to the show, you two.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having us.
So as I said, I think most people have heard of the Book of Changes, the I Ching. They know it is an oracle where you ask a question, you throw 3 coins, and it creates a hexagram, which is different lines, broken lines, straight lines. But I want to dig into its origins a little. I don't know that everyone understands where it came from and what the history of the I Ching is and what's at the heart of its philosophy. So maybe we could start there.
Well, that's great. Well, of course, the origins were in ancient China. It goes back more than 1,000 years BC. The actually historical accounts credit King Wen and the Duke of Chu with actually compiling the hexagrams into the entire sequence of 64, and also writing the text that accompanies the hexagrams, which consists of the judgments of the hexagrams and line statements, which are descriptions of the different lines of the hexagrams. So that is really when it first became an actual book.
And where did they come up with these interpretations? Do you know, is there anything about the process that you can illuminate for us?
No way. The only thing we can say is that they had an amazing grasp of really what we call archetypal situations. So
what do you mean by that, an archetypal situation?
An archetypal situation is a situation that we all share, we all experience. It can be anything. It can be conflict, it can be exhaustion, it can be joy. All the different real life situations are archetypal because we all share them, and they are all repeated through the generations.
So go ahead. Sorry.
So King Wen and the Duke of Chu had an incredible insight into the character of each of these archetypal situations, and wrote the text that accompanies each hexagram, each situation.
And so, as we were talking about before we started our live interview, when you talk about archetypes, it's collective, right? It is for all of us. But we were discussing how when you do the I Ching, it is very, very personal and not applicable to a global kind of situation. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
But if the archetypes are universal, would what's going on, the current climate of the world, not be able to be, why couldn't you throw a hexagram to give wisdom or guidance about the current situation?
Well, because the I Ching is an oracle that describes the situation of an individual. It doesn't describe a collective situation.
At the maximum it can do is if the individual has a question, then of course the global situation can play into that. But although the archetype is something that is valid for everyone, there you can say they're standardized, but which hexagram you get, that depends on your personal situation.
Right. Right.
But so the influence of the global situation, that is person for person different.
Right.
And that is what yeah,
Do
will
you
reflect in the answer.
do you think each person's own perception and own consciousness then are influencing what you read and how you apply it?
Not necessarily.
Of course, the art of interpreting divinations is that you have to try and be objective about yourself. And that is how the oracle kind of trains you into self-awareness. It encourages you. You read a hexagram and you say, oh, that is what the I Ching says about me. It holds up some kind of mirror. But the challenge is then to basically step in a helicopter and fly above yourself. And as you get more and more experience with divinations, you start to get better at it.
And do you not think, though, then the application, that's what I meant by my original question, that the application, like people think of an oracle as something mystical and kind of ethereal, but to me, you could read any words, and if you don't actually apply it to your life, I'm not sure what sort of impact it's going to have.
Well, the point is, if you consult the I Ching Oracle, then you will be given information about the situation you're experiencing. But you will also be given information about what that situation will develop into. So you will then have a window on the future to see what is developing further into time. That's how it works.
And you see all this guidance as relevant. Like, what would you say to someone today who didn't have any knowledge of the I Ching? Why is it still relevant today as much as it was back when it was first created?
Well, because nothing has changed since then. Human experience is still exactly the same.
It's archetypes. And as Jung also says, they are of all times. But where the difference is that in the original Book of Changes, I Ching or Book of Changes, it's explained in terms of the Chinese culture. What we have tried to do is interpret and explain the experience in Western terms. And we think we have been able to do that because we have consulted the oracle very often and over a long period of time, and therefore we have been able to do up a lot of experience with the oracle, and then you start. In fact, you build up a personal relationship. That is some kind of, if the oracle gives you certain hexagram, you start to understand what it means for you.
Do you think it's a guide to an ethical life?
It's very much a guide for the individual to develop their talents, their expertise, to find their way through life, to find a pathway through life, and hopefully find fulfillment.
And how do you see the relationship? Maybe you could touch on the methodology when you're consulting the I Ching and how that relates. How do you see an oracle working?
Well, you have to use a random method, because the rational mind cannot see into the future. So if you use a random method, then you bypass the intellect, and the oracle facilitates that. So let's say the subconscious is a repository of knowledge, particularly knowledge of the future. So the oracle enables you to open the door into the subconscious and receive knowledge of the future. The oracle facilitates this knowledge of the future and presents it to you chronologically. That's the basic principle.
And how, so you're saying are you saying that there's no past or future in that moment when you're working with the unconscious?
Well, that's a good one for you. There's, I mean, because she is the one who actually consults, I don't. So how do you feel when you're consulting the oracle? I mean, that's probably.
Is that the idea? I always have a feeling that I have some kind of contact via the subconscious, maybe with a guide, because I always had, when I consult the oracle, when I actually maneuver the sticks or throw the coins, then I have a feeling that I connect with something, that I actually connect, some kind of you connect and then you can download something. And that downloads via your subconscious. And what you see in the here and now is as you manipulate your sticks or throw your coins, you see this hexagram appearing, and that hexagram you can then, with the help of the text, interpret. The text is, of course, in general terms, and the translation that you have to make, and that is experience and a bit of self-knowledge, is how does this apply to my situation? And then the oracle explains in general terms your situation, and then gives advice of how to conduct yourself, what your attitude should be, and what it will be developing into.
Mm-hmm. So you've been consulting for over 30 years, quite a long time, and I understand you kept a record of all your questions.
That's correct.
So is there a pattern that emerged, or can maybe give us, let's start with some examples of the types of questions that you've asked and the guidance that was helpful.
That is, the questions are often very practical. An example is, for instance, looking for a house. What you can do with the I Ching is you look on a website of an estate agent for houses, and you think, this is a house that I would like. And then before you, sometimes you can then contact the estate agent and you ask for information without committing yourself. Then you get the information. You make sure that you know as much as possible of the reality, what you can glean, say in the way of data. And then you consult the oracle, and the oracle will then tell you if it is actually a good idea. What the oracle does is it looks behind the data. It helps. I always say the oracle helps you to look around the corner. So if there is a hidden snag or so, we had experience with finding the house where we live at the moment. We checked out a number of houses. But what the oracle did, in my idea, is we didn't have to drive to any address that wasn't worth it. Because after you had collected all the data via internet and via the estate agent, you asked the oracle, and we had the first case, and it coached us. It was like a coach. It coached us through the process. The first house that we asked about, the I Ching actually said, use your common sense, use your judgment, collect the data. You will most likely arrive at a negative judgment, but you have to check it out because you learn that way about houses. And okay, that turned out that house was no good. There was something wrong with the foundations. The next house that we asked about, we went through the process, asked the oracle, said, good that you asked me, you step back in time. So we didn't commit ourselves to anything. We didn't even drive there. It was also a house where something was wrong with the foundation. And then there was another house. And at a certain point, the I Ching clearly started pointing out to us, you can wish for all sorts of things, but you have to really become realistic. You have to adjust what you want in the way of houses. So then we got the encouragement to adjust what we wanted, and then in the end, this house, it said, now let yourself be guided by events, go through into the process, and you will find out what if it, yeah, you will see how it flows, and it flowed really at a high tempo into contract buying, moving.
Yeah, so I can just say about that, it was hexagram 17 we received. And
Yeah, that was the last one in this house.
And that was guided by events. And the inner hexagram of hexagram 17 is nourishment. So what we had was, in the end, we got what we wanted because the nourishment, that was the inner hexagram within inside the hexagram guided by events. So that's really basically how that worked.
So you have let it, as you say, coach your life. Has it ever been wrong or led you astray?
No, it's infallible.
The I Ching doesn't lead you astray. We've led ourselves astray very often. And then we, especially in the beginning, because we had to, in the beginning, we worked with the original text translated into English. And we had to learn to understand that text because that is a kind of code, you can practically say. So in the beginning, we didn't understand much of it. And then, so you get an oracle that you don't understand. And then you think, oh, let's do it anyway. And then you do it, and then it can turn out wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as we got better at interpreting the oracle, we could save ourselves a lot of time. Because when the oracle advises not to do it, indeed, and sometimes you find out afterwards, glad that we didn't do it. So it is, you lead yourself astray. But an oracle, that we can say an oracle that is something that knows the future or the.
And do you see that as separate from you? From your whatever words we want to use. I don't want to get into semantics, but when we talk about things that are outside of ourselves or not ourselves that know what is right, are you saying?
I think partly yes, outside ourselves.
Well, it's also kind of a combination because, as I said earlier, your subconscious has the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The oracle helps you to touch the knowledge.
Right. So that would mean it's inside you, not outside you.
It's both, because although within the subconscious, there is knowledge of the future, you have to access that. The oracle helps you to access that knowledge, but the oracle itself, the guide, is not you. It is a separate entity, because the guide not helps to facilitate the knowledge, but the guide also gives advice.
That's right.
So
That is where
the
the
guide
outside
is,
comes in.
if you like, an entity, a guardian angel, a guide, a spirit guide,
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it.
And so your book, A Guide Through the Human Maze, what makes your book different? Why would you encourage people to get your book and as opposed to just working directly with the I Ching?
Well, because if you, the Chinese classic, the I Ching or Book of Changes, is of course a fabulous book, but it is very cryptic. It is very difficult to understand. What we've done is we've studied that book empirically through our own experience, and at a certain point we understood the experiences that the hexagrams represented. But if you leaf through the I Ching, the Book of Changes, then you will find the language is very cryptic. I mean, for example, say the fifth line in hexagram 44. Hexagram 44 is encounters. The fifth line goes, a melon falling from heaven covered with willow leaves. So, yeah, that is not easy to comprehend.
It's
So what we've
poetic,
done-
but yeah.
Yeah, what we've done is we've translated it into mundane experience, if you like.
Can you just walk us through creating a hexagram? Let's say you've asked it. Well, how about this? Did you ask a question about doing today's interview?
No.
Oh, you didn't say, is it a good idea to do conscious living radio interview?
Well, not specifically. We are following the divination at the moment, but we didn't ask specifically about that. No.
Not too bad. I'm trying to get something specific that we can actually dig into with the lines.
Sorry, before we go further, I'm curious how much of the, the information that comes through the hexagram is, when we talk about, just the definition you said about the melon falling from heaven, how much of this is open to our own interpretation versus being like a direct message from the oracle? Because you can get one message and Tasha and I can hear the same thing and maybe interpret it completely different, where interpretation can be a big part in that. So is there a difference there, and how does that affect the message we get from our hexagram?
Well, there shouldn't be any problem with misinterpretation. These hexagrams and lines are specific in terms of the actual experience they represent. So if you draw, say, hexagram 23, then the experience described in hexagram 23 is specific, and anyone who receives that hexagram is going to have a similar an experience as anybody else who is receiving that hexagram. There is no problem with interpretation. It's factual.
What do you think about the gene keys? Have you heard about that whole following who have used the I Ching and created the gene keys?
No, I haven't heard about that.
No, they're saying it that basically this information, these hexagrams are encoded into the structure of the human DNA. Like they've taken it to this, that the soul is literally being influenced by these hexagrams. No?
I haven't heard that one, no.
I've vaguely remember that you had somebody on your show who was talking about that.
Mhm.
Now, that's not a show that I should look up.
Yeah, I found it fascinating. And again, back to Marc's comment about interpretation, I also think that so much is it literally, we could be seeing exactly the same thing. The words could be exactly the same, and we would take it to mean something else. And so as much as to you, the hexagram is clear, I really think if you took 10 people and gave them that hexagram, they're all going to interpret it personally differently. Don't you agree?
No, I don't
No.
agree with that. I think that it's black and white. I mean, I talked about hexagram 23. Hexagram 23 is a situation you're trapped in.
Yeah, and it collapses in the end. It collapses.
It's a situation that will collapse. You're trapped in it, and the reason you're trapped in it is because there are people in power whom you cannot change, you cannot influence. So that is hexagram 23. Anybody who receives that hexagram will have that experience.
Mm-hmm. And can you get into maybe the whole idea or anything you want to share around the broken lines and the unbroken lines that make up a hexagram? So they represent yin and yang, masculine, feminine. Do you want to say anything about that and why that's so important to understand?
Yeah, that is interesting. The yin and yang lines really mirror the passage of time. So if a yang line changes into a yin line, then that represents the movement in time. So in a way, these hexagrams, these lines mirror what is happening in the reality. That is, so the structure of a hexagram with the changing lines, a yang line changes into a yin line, and then you have a different hexagram. So a hexagram is transformed into a different hexagram. That is, at that point, you can see a future situation that is still yet to occur.
Mm-hmm. And for those who have never seen the oracle or don't understand it, can you really do the layman's, I throw 3 coins or I throw 3 sticks, I get like that? Take us through the actual protocol of consulting.
Yeah. So you want me to explain the protocol of consulting. You begin with asking a good question, formulating your question. It's very important that the question is as to the point as possible to get an answer, to get an answer that is clear to you.
And is it a yes and no kind of question? Give us an example of a good question.
Yeah, it is. You have to ask a question indeed. You ask one thing, you don't ask, should I do this or that? That doesn't work. Then you have to ask first, should I do this? Then you get an answer. Very often you don't need to ask the next question, shouldn't I do this? Because the answer that you get that leads you on already. And how you formulate a question, it has to be relevant to your situation, and it has to be clear cut. And really relevant to something what you do, not speculative.
Like, should I buy this house? Should I hook up with this guy? Like that?
Yeah.
So
But you can also, that is one part. you can also ask a question, say, for instance, you experience at work trouble in the relationship with your boss. Then you can ask a question like, how should I deal with with the relationship with my boss? How should I, what should my attitude be? Because that sort of, then you also get a hexagram, but that hexagram will then describe something about attitude. You have hexagrams that are about action. You also have hexagrams that are more about attitude.
Okay. So you got.
And then do you want to, about the procedure? Just you can manipulate sticks. They look like this. You can see that. If I hold them up higher, sticks like this. But these are milfoil sticks. But barbecue skewers also work. Or you throw the coins like dice. Now, sticks, that is quite extensive.
Can they be any coins? Because you mentioned a couple of specific sticks. You're throwing coins. Any coins?
Coins, as long as they are the same denomination. Like I try and hold something up. Can you see that? They are the same. That means they, just like dice, they are uniform. You have to have a uniform person. So I've got here 3 pound coins. That is what I picked up in England, and they are very, they roll nicely like dice. But
and it has a head
in Canada,
and a tail.
$1.
Yeah, exactly. Heads and tails, yeah.
Heads and tails, that's it.
But it's very easy to learn to do. It's not difficult.
So you can you throw the coins, and then you see that you get some heads, and you get a tail. And what we described in the book is the head has a value, and the tail has a value. You give a head the value 2, and the tail the value 3, or the other way around, as long as you define that in advance. And these numbers, you throw the coins, and then you have, say, for instance, a 3 and a 3 and a 2. So say, for instance, 2 heads and a tail. Then you add these numbers up, 3 and 3 and 2, and that makes 8. And 8 translates in a broken line. That is all described in the book. And you do that 6 times, and then you have 6 lines. That's a hexagram. And it is then also within the hexagram, it's possible that you get, for instance, say, we had defined heads as 3. When you get 3 heads, then you get 9. 9 is a young line, so a solid line that changes into a broken line. And if you have 3 twos, 3 tails, for instance, then you get 6, and that is a broken line that moves into a solid line. And these line changes, they represent changes in your situation. And as a result of that, you get the next hexagram, and the next hexagram, you draw the lines that are constant, the same, and the changing line, changes into its opposite. That is then the situation it will develop into.
Right. So where can people get your book? Where is it available?
It is available at Amazon, but also Barnes and Noble. We always say, look on the website of the publisher. That is johnhuntpublishing.com. And then you can find our book there. If you in the search facility, you do I Ching, then you get our book.
And for those watching this video at any time, all the information is down below in the comments or to the side, wherever it is on whatever platform you're watching. There are links there for the book and for all the information as well there.
And you have that information already from Gavin.
Yeah,
Gavin sent.
absolutely.
Now, if that is indeed the information, what I say as well, you can also, if there is a specialized bookshop in Vancouver, it's a big city, you can also order it in the bookshop, and they can get it via the wholesaler, via NBN, or they might even want to stock it if they are interested in stocking Oracle books. And there is even a website of independent bookstores that is indiebook.com. And there you have the facility that you can order the book, but you can pick it up in a nearby bookstore that is a member of indiebook.com. And the charm is then that leads you to your local independent bookstore. And they hope, of course, that you buy another book there as well. And the independent bookstore, they get the bookstore margin. So it is interesting for them that you order it and that you can pick it up there.
Just like the old days.
And that is, and that saves, the interesting thing is it saves shipping costs.
Yeah,
So
it's nice to support small business and
is.
independent business in today's world. You had a question, Tasha, because I did have one too also.
Oh, go ahead, Marc.
I'm just curious, there's so much from, we're talking I Ching today, then you've got astrology, we've mentioned gene keys that Tasha and I did some work with, there's human design, there's all sorts of different, oracles and different ways of, getting guidance from the universe, let's say. Yeah. Who is I Ching for? Who isn't it for?
It's for anybody, everybody. It's a guide to help you find your way through life. It advises you. It gives you incredibly important information about the situations you're in, and also about the situations you're going to go into. So for us, it's a kind of indispensable guide, and everybody could benefit from it.
I think it's also a personal thing. You have people that have it isn't. The funny thing with oracles is it's a bit of a personal relationship. You have people who are good at tarot. Tarot is more vague, you can say, multiple interpretations of cards in relation to the positions in a certain spread. That is, some people would say that is too complex. We find the I Ching is more straightforward. It is a system that leads to a certain result. And in that sense, Tasha was talking about what makes your book better than the original I Ching or Book of Changes. Yeah. That is that it explains the code in terms of Western terms of experience, generalized, not just our own, but generalized. But we found it very interesting to use a book, our book, an interpretation book, but also the translation. Because if you every time contact the original text, then you build up a feeling for it. But I say always, if the I Ching as we see it, and our book is then a very clear user manual for it, anybody can start. and say, yeah, I don't have special intuition or so. Never mind. Start with it. That intuition comes by using the oracle and by contacting whatever is behind it. And if you do that regular, it's like a muscle that you exercise, then you gradually develop. And what I find very important, but that also goes for tarot, is these oracles help you to develop more awareness, to be more aware of yourself and what's happening in your surroundings and why, and in your interactions with others. So you become more aware of yourself and the world around you and the people you have to deal with or relate to.
Mhm.
That is it. It raises your level of awareness. And with which oracle is the best, I think it's a personal thing.
But
Yeah.
certainly what I would say is that the important thing about this oracle, the I Ching Oracle, is that it should be consulted by the individual independently. It's not something that you need to get a reading on, or you need to consult an expert. All you need to do is get hold of the oracle, learn how to throw the coins, and completely independently, you can consult the oracle yourself.
So
And
actually,
that-
someone listening right now could get 3 coins of the same denomination, throw it 6 times, write down what they receive with the heads and the tails, look it up, right, in
Yes.
a book, and go, there's my hexagram, right?
That's
you could
right.
ask an important question right now with no previous knowledge and get some guidance on that
Yeah,
answer.
Try
Yeah.
it out, because our book is a user manual. The procedure is step by step described. It's just like a cookbook. If you've never made this particular recipe,
Right.
you have the book open on the worktop, and you start preparing your ingredients, and you put them together, and then plop,
Mhm.
there is your hexagram.
Well, and I love what you say, that the more you use something, the more you open to trusting that part of yourself, the more information and the clearer the information is. I love that, because you're right. The rational mind is not going to follow this trip. That's not the part that's going to receive the information, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So you have to bypass it. And that is why all these oracles use some random method or another. With the I Ching, these coins and the sticks are the traditional methods that are also described in the original Book of Changes, like that, like it is translated by Richard Wilhelm and by Caron.
Mhm.
But
Well, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
yes, thank you very much.
And again, the name of the book, The I Ching Oracle, A Guide Through the Human Maze. Thank you. And it's good night. I guess you guys are 10 p.m. in the Netherlands. So you're
Yes,
ready to
it's
go
now
to bed.
nearly 11.
Yeah, time for bed.
There you go.
Well, thank you for staying up late in your area so that you could join us mid-afternoon here in beautiful British Columbia. We appreciate your flexibility. Thank you.
Well, thank you for making it all possible. And the technology is absolutely amazing. You travel to Vancouver without having to sit in a what we always call a flying tin can, and
Yeah.
then for 10 hours.
Yeah,
So this is fantastic, and I can see you live like this. Amazing.
yes, thank you very much. Yeah, it's
So
great.
thank you both for your time and for your what shall I say? Some tough perpetrating questions. Yeah, but that is
Tasha's
good.
good.
Yeah,
Tasha's
that is
always
good.
great.
A light grilling, that's good.
Light drilling. Uh-oh. I'm
Yeah,
just
but
curious.
that's good. You're good
I
at it. That is-
put myself in the shoes of people who don't know anything and hope
Yeah.
that I'm going to get enough that they actually understand it and get excited by it, because I I personally
That's
love
it.
oracles and love the
That's it.
use of opening to something that gives guidance. So thank you very much for joining us today. And
Okay.
again, the show will be on Wednesday, 6 to 7 p.m. On 100.5 FM in Vancouver. I'm Tasha Sims.
And I'm Marc Caron.